Good morning! This is Sarah with Posh Pooch Designs, and it's time for our live video chat, or as I say, live with Sarah. Well, good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, and if you don't know, every Tuesday I try to have a live video chat to answer some of the questions that I get in through the week. And every Tuesday, it's at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time in the morning, because I'm here in Colorado. And of course, anywhere in the world, the time is going to be different. And don't worry if you miss it. I always post them to YouTube, and you can also find them on my Facebook page. Well, it's been a crazy couple of weeks around here, and the weather's turned warm, so that's really nice. We got our air conditioner fixed. It was hot last week. I have to show you my brand new cup. It's a donut, and it says, "I do not care." Is this not hilarious? I do not care. I do not care. Good morning, Marie. Good morning, Karen. Be sure and clink in. Clink. Oh my goodness, it has turned warm here. I think they said it's going to be 90 degrees here, which I know for those of you in the south, that's not that warm. For those of us here in Colorado, that's pretty warm. The nice thing about Colorado is even though it's hot, it's pretty much a dry hot, and I don't have near the sinus issues that I had when we lived down south. So, we have a lot to talk about today. My wonderful new cup. Clink in. Good morning, Tammy. So, I know everybody's, kids are out of school and vacations are starting and a lot of fun summer stuff. So we may not have as many on live today. And like I said, you can always catch us over on my YouTube channel, and you can also catch us on the Facebook page. So today's topic, I got a question. Let me grab my notebook here. I got a question last week, and then I got one yesterday as well, asking me about a certain pattern. Unpacking her yarn today. Woohoo! That's always fun. I love organizing yarn. Anyway, she asked me, she made one of my patterns, and it came out a little bit smaller. And I said, well, everybody has a different gauge and a different tension, and everyone crochets differently. And so I thought I would just put together some tips today to help us, some things that I learned along the way that help with sizing patterns, because all pattern designers all have a different gauge as well. And if you want your item to come out the size that the pattern designer is saying, then you need to learn some of these tips. You guys are so funny. I love reading your comments. So here's some tips. All right, I'm going to show you this. This is one of our patterns that I did this week. This is my travel pillow. Super easy. It's just a rectangle with a bite out of it. Anyway, the questions I got yesterday is, yours measures, I think, 16 by 9, but hers didn't measure as big. And so what you need to understand is that everybody crochets differently, and it's going to measure differently. And so that's where hook size makes a difference. Now on that pattern, I'm calling for an H hook. This one is not an H hook. This is a K. And I think this is like an F. But I'm using these as a demonstration because I tend to be a loose crocheter. Remember, I've said often I'm a loose hooker. Well, I tend to be a loose crocheter, and even when I'm doing other people's patterns, I almost always go down a hook size because I tend to crochet loosely. And there are some patterns from people that I've purchased or I've done, and I know their style, and I know they crochet a lot tighter than I do. And so what you need to do is, if you begin crocheting and you measure as you go, as we've talked about many times, and you see that, say, your first row isn't coming out right, and the pattern says it's only supposed to be 10 inches and it's 5, or it's supposed to be 10 inches and it's 11 or 12, then you need to adjust your hook size. Or you can just adjust your gauge. Start, try again and make it a little bit tighter, or change your hook size. Go up a size or go down a size. Because everyone does, like I said, crochets differently. And so one way that you can resize a pattern is just by changing your hook size. I've had people say to me, oh, the hook size doesn't matter. But it does. It really, really does. I mean, look at the difference just in these two. This is a K, this is an F. If you only crochet with an F all the time and you're using a chunky yarn or even a looser lacy pattern, because sometimes I'll use a bigger hook because I want the stitches to be more open and more lacy, or I'll use a tighter, smaller crochet hook because I want the stitches to be tight and close. So it just depends on the pattern. And also, when you buy a skein of yarn and it gives a suggested hook, it's just a suggestion. You do not have to use the hook that's called for on the yarn. It's just a suggestion for the gauge that they give you on the yarn. So that's one way you can adjust a pattern, is go up or down on your hook size. Now another way that you can adjust a pattern is the yarn itself. I've got 2 skeins of yarn here as an example. This is just a Red Heart Sport Weight. I believe Sport Weight's in number 3. Can't see it on there. But you can see it's nice and thin. Well, if you're doing a hat and it says, if you're doing a hat and it says to use a 3, but you're finding it coming out way too big, you can even go down farther to a smaller yarn. Or it's coming out way too small, you can go up to the next yarn. I mean, look at this chunky yarn. Do you think if you make a 4x4 inch swatch with this that it's going to be the same size as this one? No, this is going to be a lot bigger because the yarn is a lot bigger. Yeah, I got this one on clearance at Hobby Lobby. Don't forget, Hobby Lobby's having a big clearance on their yarn, and a lot of their stuff is going to be really cheap because they're resetting. Anyway, that's a little extra note in there. But you can adjust. For instance, if you're making, say, just a square, and you want it to be, say, 3x3, and it's coming out 2x2, and you're using Sport Weight, you can go up to a number 4 and use a worsted weight. It's going to be just a little bit bigger. Or say you're doing granny squares and it's coming out way too big and you're using worsted weight number 4, you can go down to a sport weight or even smaller. So the second way that you can adjust a pattern is just to change the weight of your yarn. And again, measure as you go. I'm probably going to say that 100 times. Okay, so that's 2 ways that you can adjust. And those are a couple of simple tips. But I'm going to talk to you about 2 other ways also. I've got a square here. This is just a washcloth, a baby washcloth that I made. And it's made out of cotton. And let's see, let me measure it. It measures about 4.5 by 4.5. Well, let's say you love this pattern, but you want to make some bigger ones. Well, what you can do is the pattern will tell you 3 chains per inch or 2 double crochets per ½ inch or something like that. And you use those measurements to make it bigger. And when you start your beginning chain, say this one starts with 20, you can add 10 more chains or you can add 20 more chains depending on how much bigger that you want it. And measure, measure, measure as you go. But you can adjust it and make it longer. Okay, so then you're doing the same amount of stitches and you've got this long rectangle. Well, then you add rows, and usually, I don't know about this one, but usually 2 to 3 rows per inch. And of course, check your pattern because it will tell you on there the gauge, and or inches, stitches or rows per inch. And you just add more rows. So you've added more chains to make it longer this way, and then you add more rows to make it bigger this way. And you can use the same pattern technique, but come up with a bigger washcloth or square. And you can also do that when working a granny square by adding more rows around and measuring as you go as well. I love granny squares. It was one of the first things that I learned to crochet, and I love, love, love them. And I always will love them. And there's just so many things that you can so many things that you can do with them. So that's one way if you're working on rows. And this works great if you're making a scarf or a blanket. Say you found a baby blanket pattern that you really, really like, but you want to make it bigger for your bedspread. Measure what you need, add the appropriate amount of chains, and the appropriate amount of rows for length. And you can do this for just about any pattern that is stitched in rows or in, rows and also in squares. So I noticed the video is glitching a little. And like I said last week, it's been doing that a little bit on Facebook, and I'm not really sure why. So just hang in there, and if it glitches off, refresh your screen. Okay, so that's another way that you can adjust a pattern. Well, say your pattern is working in rounds. And I've got one here. This is just a coaster. One of my simple, you can use it as a coaster or a face wash cloth because it's made out of soft cotton. Now, one thing that you can do is if you want it to be bigger, you can add more rows around, adding those increases. That's one way you can make it bigger. But let's say you're working on a hat and you made the hat and it's, you're working around from the top or maybe from the bottom. You can always add more rows. But what if it's not wide enough at the top? When you're working a hat, you have those increases, and you'll increase for a couple of rows, and then you'll not increase anymore and just stitch the sides of the hat. Well, what you can do is you can add one or two more of the increase rows according to the pattern. And usually it starts you on like 6 or 8, and you can start on 10. Just make sure that you adjust. And I always recommend measuring the person's head around or the baby's head around, and length from crown to how long you want it. Those are very important. And a lot of people will make a hat and they're like, oh, my kid's head's so big it doesn't fit. Don't finish the hat. Measure as you go, because you'll get more frustrated if you do the whole thing and then it doesn't fit. So don't get frustrated. Measure, measure, measure. And that's the fourth thing I was going to say is measure as you go. Your tape measure, what is it I always say, is one of the most important tools in your crochet tool bag or crochet project bag. So those are the 4 things I wanted to tell you. And just to recap, the size of your hook is very important. If it's too big or too small, adjust by going up or down a hook size or 2 and measure as you go. If the yarn is not working and it's too thin, you can always go up or down a yarn size and measure as you go. And then the last thing we talked about were these. You can add chains or you can add rows to make it bigger. Same thing with this one. You can add chains at the beginning and you can add rows to make it bigger. One of the things that that I learned is to experiment. Don't be afraid to try your own ideas to make things bigger or smaller. And don't be afraid that it's going to mess up. Most of the time, you can frog it. There are some yarns that are harder to frog than others. But, you know, don't do the whole blanket and go, oh, it's too short on the sides. Measure it. Measure it length. Measure it side. And it's for anything that you make. A hat, a scarf, even a dress or a blanket. Measure, measure, measure. And you will hear this from me forever and forever, probably every single video, how important it is to have a tape measure handy. And don't tell me you can't afford one, okay? Because these are 99 cents at Hobby Lobby. Walmart has them. Joann's has them. Every place. They're cheap, cheap, cheap. And you can find these over in the fabric department. You can also find them up front most of the time at Hobby Lobby and Joann's in those little baskets. And I have them everywhere. Plus my grandkids love to play with them. So, anyway, measure as you go. Now, an example of when it's important to know the difference between yarn sizes, I'm going to show you one of our projects we did this week. So, what's new this week at Posh Pooch Designs? Well, yesterday we did a video because I had a friend request it. And it was these little bags. And if you'll notice, they're not the same size. This one is stitched with Caron Simply Soft, and this one is stitched with cotton. I think just a sugar and cream or peaches and cream cotton. And this is where you can see it came out different because the yarns were different. Even though they're both considered a number 4, the Caron Simply Soft works up a little bit smaller. And what she wanted this for is because down south they have a store called Aldi. We don't have one here. And she wanted to be able to keep a couple of quarters in her bag. And what she does is she keeps 2 or 3 quarters in her bag. She uses one for herself, and then when she sees someone who doesn't have a quarter, she's got an extra one, because you have to have a quarter to get a buggy. They have a little thing, you stick the quarter in, it loosens the chain, and then you go and shop with your buggy. And then when you're all done, you put your groceries away in your car, and then you put your buggy back and you get your quarter back. You're not spending any money, you just need one there. And some people that are new to Aldi don't know that. And so out of the kindness of her heart, she keeps a couple quarters in her little bag now. And she sticks this on her keychain. Or you can just put it in your glove box. You can put it, hang it on your mirror. But she's got a little bag for quarters. And the neat thing about this bigger one, and believe me, the pattern is stitched exactly the same. We're just using cotton. But look what fits right inside. Stick this in your project bag, and you've got a little bag to always have your tape measure with you. Another really neat thing about these bags is it's the perfect size for the American Girl doll. Look at that. Perfect size. Guess I'm going to have to send some of these to my granddaughter. All right, so we did that yesterday, but that's also a good example of how different yarns stitch up differently. Okay. All right, the other thing we did, of course, was last week I told you I lost my travel pillow, and so I made another one, and here's the one I made. And this is made out of Red Heart's stripes. But this yarn is some that I had about 3 years ago. It's not the new stuff. And I got it on clearance, and it works up beautifully. And I just love it. Has a little pocket you can stick. Well, if you're going to take your yarn stuff with you, you can put your tape measure in there. But you can also fit your earbuds or maybe the cord to your phone so that it can, for recharging and things like that. Or a tube of chapstick, whatever. But it's a great size. I love it. Measures about 16 inches across, about 9 this way. And it has this little latch here so you can hook it on your bag, your suitcase, or whatever so you don't lose it. You can also hook it on your arm. Maybe I should have done that, then I wouldn't have lost mine. Another thing I did this week was right back here. If you look back there, that is a American flag garden sign, garden flag. It's made out of thick, chunky yarn, and it works up in about 2 hours. And when I was doing the video, I was like, oh my goodness, we're almost done already, because it worked up so quickly, and I really, really love it. And I actually made 2. One's downstairs in the front, and then I hung this one up here so we could have it up for the month of July, since the month of July is our patriotic month. We just had Flag Day here in June, and then 4th of July is coming, so I thought I'd leave it hanging up there. The other thing we did this week is this headband. And the neat thing about this headband, this one is stitched in worsted weight number 2, but you can also stitch it in sport weight or cotton for a little bit lighter band so it's not so hot. And it works great, super easy, and the star on this here is made exactly the same as the star up there on the flag, just a little bit smaller. And it's just a plus and an X, kind of a starburst, and then you put a little stitch in the middle so that it stays put. And that's what's new this week at Posh Pooch Designs. And that's all I really have to talk about. And I just want to remind you, don't let crochet frustrate you, because crochet is fun. And don't let the yarns get on your nerve, because they're fun. And anytime you buy a yarn, like say the boucle that's thick and bumpy, don't let it win. Learning about all different kinds of yarns and how to work with all different kinds of yarns and how to adjust patterns and things like that, that's the fun of crochet. I love a good challenge when it comes to this stuff, because I'm kind of an artist at heart. And a lot of people are more technical, and they want everything to be precise and technical. And with crochet, a lot of times it can't be that way. And it's because, you know, like I said at the beginning, we all crochet differently. Some of us are tighter, some of us are looser. Some of us, for some reason, make a little bit longer stitch, or, you know, just struggle with joining maybe, or have different ways of doing things that help them. And that's kind of why I love what I do, is because, you know, when I was first learning, I didn't have anyone to ask, and I sort of winged it. And I do things probably different than technical. People want them done. And so I thought that I would just share some of those things with you. And that's why I love doing these live videos, because I'm able to kind of to just be me and silly and have fun, and got to know a lot of wonderful people and maybe answer some questions. And so if you have any more questions, remember, you can contact me at www.poshpoochdesigns.com. And up there on the right corner, when you click on that, that's my webpage, and right up there on the right corner, it'll say Contact Posh Pooch Designs. You can hit that tab, and it'll take you right to my email, and you can ask me any questions that you have. Oh, Marie says, boy, do I measure. I do. I measure everything because I don't like to redo stuff. I hate frogging, and I hate pulling it out. Rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it, in case you're wondering why we call it frogging. Rip, 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 rip. I hate that. I do. I don't like, and a lot of times if I don't like it and it didn't turn out right, I just toss it aside, because I have like a corner where I have a little basket, and those are my fix basket stuff. And so then I'll come back later and take it out when I'm not so mad at it. I put it in the corner, and then when I'm not mad at it anymore, I pull it out, especially if it's a really pretty yarn that I want to use. Well, just a heads up, there won't be any new videos this week. We have a family matter we're going to take care of. And so I will see you next Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time. Stay crafty, my friends. Bye-bye now.